About a year ago, something terrible happened to my little sister, Holly. For privacy reasons, I won't use real names, so I'll call everyone in this story by names from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Holly, who's been mute since an accident when she was 5, is a smart and kind 16-year-old. She can whisper a little, but it's hard for her, and people at school can be cruel about it. I'm her older brother, 21 at the time, and we live together in a small apartment. Our mom isn't around much, and our dad is distant, so it's up to me to take care of Holly while working full-time at a car parts company. Money's tight, and Holly has been struggling with bullying, which had gotten worse around this time. Holly is older than most of her classmates since she repeated a year in middle school. She refuses special education programs because they didn't help her before, so she's in regular classes. Being pretty and older than her peers, she catches attention, mostly bad, but some good. One senior, who I'll call Dio, stood out because he treated her well and even kept bullies away from her. He was tall, confident, and intimidating, and seeing Holly happy when she talked about him made me hesitate to interfere. They hung out a few times under my watch, and everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. One day, Holly stopped smiling. She wouldn't talk about Dio, and he avoided me when I confronted him. Something felt off, but I couldn't figure out what. That's when everything started to spiral out of control. Holly's change in mood was unsettling. She had always been strong, but now she looked fragile, her usual spark completely gone. When I asked her about school or Dio, she either shook her head or signed that everything was fine. I didn't buy it, but she wouldn't open up. Desperate for answers, I went to her school's counselor and assistant principal. From them, I learned that she still spent all her free time near Dio. That confused me. If she wasn't happy anymore, why was she still around him? I couldn't let it go, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. One evening, I invited both Holly and Dio to dinner at Olive Garden. My plan was simple, but far from legal. I had seen Dio enter his phone password before, and during dinner, I managed to swipe his phone. Once home, I scoured his messages and emails. I didn't find anything directly involving Holly, but I learned that Dio regularly drank and smoked weed with his friends. That detail didn't connect to Holly yet, but it felt like a piece of the puzzle. I returned his phone a few days later, claiming it had accidentally ended up in our laundry. He thanked me, none the wiser, but I still didn't have the answers I was looking for. My next step was to dig deeper. Using the text I'd found as leverage, I got the school administration to review security footage for any unusual behavior involving Holly and Dio. The footage didn't show anything obvious, but something caught my attention, both of them repeatedly entering the central bathroom at school, one right after the other. There was a janitor's closet connecting the boys' and girls' bathrooms, completely out of view of the cameras. That detail stuck with me. I remembered that closet from when I'd visited the school. It didn't lock properly. My gut told me something was going on there, and it wasn't good. With this suspicion weighing on me, I finally confronted Holly directly. I sat her down and told her I knew something was wrong and that I wasn't mad, just worried. At first, she froze and refused to look at me. But when I didn't back down, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she shakily signed what had been happening. The truth hit me like a truck. Dio had been forcing her into that janitor's closet. He'd held her down and raped her. She couldn't scream or call for help, and he had threatened to hurt her if she told anyone. Worse, he had made her meet him there regularly, using her inability to speak as a weapon against her. Hearing this, I felt a rage I can't put into words. I wanted to call the police right then and there, but I knew there wasn't enough evidence for them to do anything. It was her word against his, and in her case, it wasn't even a spoken word. I decided I couldn't leave this to chance. Dio had to pay, and I was going to make sure he did. Knowing what Dio had done and the position Holly was in, I realized I couldn't rely on the system to bring him down. I needed something more decisive. Over the next few days, I pieced together a plan, a brutal, calculated way to destroy him. The first step was learning his routine. Through his texts and social media, I knew he often left home to drink and smoke with his friends on weekends. I also learned where he lived and, crucially, that his parents were frequently out. This gave me the opening I needed. That Saturday, I scoped out his house. Just as expected, his parents were gone, and he left for one of his parties. Using the spare key hidden above the porch light, I slipped inside. The house was quiet, and I quickly found his room. The anger bubbling inside me boiled over as I trashed it. I smashed his computer, threw his belongings everywhere, and even urinated on his bed. Then, I planted 2 small bags of weed I'd gotten from a friend. After making his room look like a complete disaster, I ransacked other parts of the house to make it appear like a random burglary. I took nothing except his wallet, which I later left near a sleeping homeless man in the park. Phase 2 was psychological. Using his debit card, I ordered a batch of sex toys online and had them shipped to his address. I knew this would humiliate him and raise questions from his parents. Then I anonymously called them, telling them I'd seen their son drinking and smoking with teenagers. Judging by their reaction, this wasn't the first time they'd heard such a complaint. The final phase was the most dangerous. I waited on the secluded back road Dio used to walk home from his drinking parties. Wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, I stayed hidden in the bushes for over 2 hours. When he finally appeared, stumbling slightly, I jumped out, pretending I had a gun by keeping my hand in my hoodie pocket. He froze. I demanded his phone and whatever cash he had, though I knew he wasn't carrying his wallet. He handed over his phone in a panic and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. With his phone in my possession and knowing the password, I enacted the final step. I composed an email from his school account. In it, I wrote a confession, detailing his crimes, the assaults on Holly, his underage drinking, and his possession of drugs on school property. I made sure the tone was personal enough to sound believable. Once I sent it to the school administration, I snapped the phone in half and discarded it. By Monday, the fallout had begun. Holly returned to school with a can of mace I'd bought her for protection. Dio was nowhere to be seen. Later, she was called into the counselor's office, where she finally opened up about everything. The school had already received the confession, and combined with her statement, they reported Dio to the police. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of rape, as well as drug and alcohol-related offenses. To top it all off, his parents, furious and ashamed, disowned him. It felt like justice, but it wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. Despite Dio being arrested and expelled, the damage was already done. Holly's trauma didn't disappear just because he was out of her life. She struggled more than ever. Her grades slipped, and the light in her eyes faded. She rarely smiled, and the weight of what she'd endured was crushing her. I tried to help, but no matter how much support I gave her, the scars ran deep. Then, in March of 2018, things took a terrifying turn. I came home from work to find Holly unconscious in the bathroom, her wrists bleeding. She had tried to end her life. It was pure luck that I arrived in time to call for help and get her to the hospital. I felt like I'd failed her. I thought taking down Dio would protect her, but I hadn't realized the emotional toll it would take. Since then, Holly has been in therapy. Progress has been slow, but she's getting better. She smiles sometimes now, though it's not like it used to be. The road ahead is long, and I know the trauma will stay with her forever. Still, I hope that one day she can find peace. As for Dio, I don't know where he is now. I can only hope that karma catches up to him in whatever prison cell he's rotting in. What he did to Holly was unforgivable, and he deserves every bit of punishment he gets. If you or someone you know is facing bullying, abuse, or trauma, speak up or reach out to someone who can help. No one should have to face these things alone. Thanks for reading this story. If it resonated with you, please follow my YouTube channel for more stories and discussions. Your support means the world to me.